can do.
أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم أذن للذين يقاتلون بأنهم ظلموا وإن الله على نصرهم لقدير الذين يخرجون من ديارهم بغير حق إلا أن يقولوا ربنا الله ولولا دفع الله الناس بعضهم ببعض لهدمت صوامع بيع وصلوات ومساجد يذكر فيها اسم الله كثيرا ولا ينصرن الله من ينصره إن الله لقوي عزيز. I seek refuge with Allah from Satan the accursed. In the name of Allah, the most gracious, ever merciful. Permission to fight is given to those against whom war is made, because they have been wronged, and Allah indeed has power to help them. Those who have been driven out from their homes unjustly only because they said, "Our Lord is Allah," and if Allah did not repel some men by means of others, there would surely have been pulled down cloisters and churches and synagogues and mosques, wherein the name of Allah is oft commemorated, and Allah will surely help one who helps him. Allah is indeed powerful, mighty. Surah Hajj, chapter 22, verse 40 to 41. Jazakallah.
Okay, Jazakallah. Right, so the topic for today is what is jihad? So again, I'll have a little speak and then we'll open it up for questions, comments and whatever. Right, so what is the true concept of jihad? So this is the first thing which we need to understand. The roots Arabic word jihad is jahad, which connotes endurance of rigorous conditions. This means that jihad is best understood that it means to strive to the utmost for the achievement of any purpose and to leave nothing undone in pursuance of it. So it's relating to anything that you're striving to achieve that. And this is what Islam teaches, that we should always be trying our best. Whether we achieve it or not, we should try our best. This is what Allah wants to see. And so basically this is what jihad is. In any field, it's try your best to achieve whatever you want to do. Now we understand there are three types of jihad. So we'll go through these ones. But the first jihad is against oneself. And this is what we call the Jihad Akbar, the greatest jihad. And that is the inner purification, to make ourselves righteous, to purify ourselves. That's the hardest thing, because we've got obviously so many temptations around the world. The second jihad is the Jihad Kabir, and this is to propagate the religion. Now this is hard because obviously to go out and say to someone about your faith or what is right, more often than not people will turn against you. And so it takes courage, and that's why it's a second jihad. The third jihad is the Jihad Asghar, the holy war, the jihad against the enemy of the freedom of conscience. And it should be noticed this is the lesser jihad out of three. Although most people think that that's the main jihad, this is not the fact. Right, so the Holy Prophet Muhammad, when he was returning from an expedition, which was at Tabligh, he is reported to have said, "We're returning from the jihad, the fighting, to the Jihad Akbar, the struggle against self." So here we see the different types of jihad that's being mentioned by the Holy Prophet Muhammad. It is also said that the mujahid, the one who does jihad, who is exalted above other mujahids, is the one who strives against his own self. So again, showing that this struggle to purify yourself, this is the hardest jihad in the eyes of the Holy Prophet Muhammad. Right, so Jihad Akbar, the greatest jihad. As I said, this is referred to as the greatest jihad because it's this inner struggle that we do to try to purify ourselves, to try to develop that taqwa, that righteousness. And that is very, very difficult, but it is a lifelong struggle, which we must try to keep doing. So Allah always guides us to good, but of course our natural tendencies is to incline to evil. And the Holy Quran in chapter 12, verse 54 describes this as nafsi amara, the self that inclines to evil. So this is the struggle, the battle that we have this inclination to do evil, but of course we are in control. Evil cannot force us to do evil. And so this is a struggle to make sure that we don't do the evil. Instead, we purify ourselves, we become more righteous, we develop that taqwa. And that battle, like I say, is the hardest battle, and that's why it's called the Jihad Akbar. The Prophet ﷺ has said, our natural state, as long as we are not guided by reason and understanding, is to follow our natural bent of eating, drinking, sleeping, waking, anger, and provocation, like the animals. Once a person is guided by reason and understanding and brings their natural state under control and regulates it in an appropriate manner, then they start to develop the moral state to the second stage of development, which is called nafsi lawama, the reproving self. And then to the final moral state of nafsi mutmaina, the soul at rest. Thus, to purify oneself is a constant internal struggle which one must strive to practice in order to achieve paradise. This is taken from the philosophy and teachings of Islam. And in fact, this was the thing that attracted me to this particular book. It was the first book that I read. And when I read this, I felt that I was at that lowest stage, that animal self, that I just did things because that was instinct. And no one likes to be called an animal. And I certainly did not like to be called an animal. And that's why I continue to read this book. So this was the first thing that hit me, that made me turn towards religion. But it's a very important thing because it's showing how we develop ourselves from that animal self, that we just follow our basic instincts, to thinking about what we're going to eat, when we're going to eat, how we're going to eat, and so on and so forth, until finally we get to that high state where we're at one with God, we're at peace, we have that inner peace within ourselves. The Jihad Kabir, I've dug out an old picture because I was talking to one person, Mansour Clark, about the Bosnian trip that we did back in 1993. And this picture shows with Bosnians and the first convoy that went to Bosnia. So, what is the Jihad Kabir? The Jihad Kabir is propagating the religion. And that is because to go out and spread the message of Islam, to try to improve the society that one lives in, means that first you have to overcome your own inhibitions and be ready to face abuse, humiliation, and even persecution. And this is why it's the second hardest type of struggle that we must do. So obviously, many of you have gone out and done Tabligh, gone to the streets and so on and so forth. You know what it's like. Some people will do abuse you. But even if you don't do that, even let's say you're walking down the street and a person abuses a lady or snatches her purse, what are you going to do? You know they've done some wrong. What you should do is obviously go up to that person and stop that bad action. But you know that if you do that, the likelihood is that they're going to turn on you. So this is the difficulty. We want to spread goodness. We want to tell people to do good. But of course, there's a danger that they will turn against you. So you have to overcome that. And then, inshallah, you'll be successful. The final jihad is the Jihad Asghar. Now, this is as holy war. And the reason it is placed third is because obviously no war can be holy. How can a war be holy? But Allah recognizes that in certain circumstances, there is a need to defend yourself for the sake of your faith. And so this is the Jihad Asghar. Now, there has to be two conditions for this. So if we're going to fight in the name of Allah, then two conditions have to be there. The first is it must be defense. You should not be the aggressor. You should not attack people. But if they're attacking you, you can defend yourself. And the second is that the aggressors are trying to prevent you from practicing your faith. So if they are stopping you from practicing your faith, then you can do this. Now, of course, our whole purpose in life is to worship Allah. So if someone is preventing you from worshipping Allah, what should you do? This is your purpose in life. You're being prevented from what you've been created for. So the Holy Quran tells us that the first thing we should do is move, go somewhere else. And obviously, then you can practice your faith there. But if they go there and they or someone else stops you, eventually you're going to have to stand up and fight. So if you look at the example of the Holy Prophet Muhammad, initially he was in Mecca, and eventually, because of the persecution, they moved to Abyssinia and then to Yaghrib, Medina. But it still continued. And so eventually they were given permission to fight. So these two conditions have to be there for it to be a jihad, a holy war. Okay, so I've just been explaining this, but as it says that our purpose in life is to worship God, and then obviously if someone prevents you from doing that, so so you should first move away to a different place. But if they still follow you, then you've been allowed to fight. So according to the teachings of Islam, if a person fights in a true jihad and then dies, he will become a martyr, a shaheed. And so we believe that that person will go to paradise. So when fighting a true jihad, therefore a Muslim doesn't fear death, because it means that if he dies fighting this jihad, he's going to go to paradise. So an army that doesn't fear death, that then becomes a very strong army. So because of this reason, the Muslim leaders desired to call any war a jihad, because they knew that the effect that it would have on the army, that they would not be scared of death, they will attain paradise. And that's why in the last century, there's been many jihads by the Muslim leaders, and sometimes against Muslims themselves. Now here we use the example of Iran and Iraq. And of course, Saddam Hussein was not religious at all, but he became religious so that he could call a jihad, because he saw or knew the effect it would have on the people. But in this particular case, Muslim Iran fighting Muslim Iraq, and both sides were calling it a jihad. So it's ridiculous, but there you go. So this brings on then the next question, that when is a war a jihad and when isn't it? Now, it was recited by Tabligh at the beginning, and it's a very important verse that he has recited, that permission to take up arms is given to those against whom war is made, because they've been wronged, and Allah indeed has power to help them. Those who have been driven out their homes unjustly, only because they say, our Lord is Allah. So when we analyze this, Permission to take up arms has been given against those to whom war is made defensive because they've been wronged, because they're not allowed to practice their faith. All they say is, our Lord is Allah. And people are preventing from doing that. So this is, as we said, the two reasons why a holy war, a jihad, can be called. Now, when we look at, like I say, over the last 100 years or so, so many jihads have been there. But these have been political wars. And any political war, whether it's between Muslims and non-Muslims or just between Muslims and Muslims, doesn't matter what they say, it doesn't become a jihad. It's not qualifying that previous verse that we just said. Now, some people will consider it a war of rights as a jihad, since each party believes that we are in the right. And so therefore, each party declares that the war is in the name of God and for the sake of the truth, therefore is jihad. But again, this is just their definition. It's not what Allah is saying. So this may be a second definition of jihad, but whether it's called jihad or not in the terminology of Islam, its definition does not apply, because this definition is against the basic logic that whoever of the two parties is based on truth, the war becomes a jihad in the Quranic terminology. All kinds of wars have been fought. So whenever there is a war, the two parties are fighting. And it's obvious that if one party is not based 100% on truth, it will assess that it's based on truth. And it's very rare that two parties are equally to be blamed or two parties to be equally right. So you can look at any war. Of course, they will try to justify the reasons, and often they hide the real reasons. But certainly when they're calling it jihad, they will say that it's a true jihad. Now, generally, one party has to be oppressed and the other is the oppressor. That's a general way things are happening. The war of every oppressed people is not called a jihad. Now, when we bear this in mind with Palestine and things like this we should understand that just because they're being oppressed does not make it a jihad. The war of that oppressed group is called jihad, who are being stopped from declaring their faith in God and who are being punished for their religion. So only when those two conditions of being defensive and in the name of God comes into play can we call it a jihad. As the Holy Quran states, that they have committed no crime except for they say, our Lord is Allah's. This is the only reasons why you can call a true jihad, a jihad that's accepted by Allah. So if a war is being imposed on someone only for this reason, and the enemy has started the war, not you, and it is the enemy who's raised the sword against the Muslims, then the crime of the Muslims should be none except that they declare that God is their Lord and deny other gods besides God. Then this can be called a jihad if these two conditions of being defensive and in the name of faith are being stopped from practicing their faith. Now, the other question that's often raised is that was Islam spread by the sword? We know that Islam, in the time of the Holy Prophet Muhammad spread, but then in the Caliphs, it spread further and further until it spread over many, many countries. Was this by the sword? Because certainly Muslims were fighting a lot of wars. The first thing we should always understand is that you cannot force a religion on anyone. Of course, you can force a person to accept anything. You put a sword to their neck, they're going to say whatever you want them to say. But once you take that sword away, that's a different thing. So you can't force their heart to accept it. And this is why the clear teaching in the Holy Quran, there is no compulsion in religion. You can't force anything. God doesn't force us. We should not force other people. So Islam was not spread by the force. It was spread through the love of the message, that they practiced this Islam and people saw the beauty of that message. This was what made it a powerful force, that when the Muslims came to any country, it was the message that conquered the people and made them want to become Muslims and remain Muslims long after the Muslim army had left. Now we see that throughout the life of the Holy Prophet Muhammad, every war that he fought was defensive and due to preventing him and his followers from worshipping the one God. Therefore, every war that he fought, that was a true jihad, and that's what we should turn to understand what jihad is. After his death, Islam spread far and wide, but whenever the Muslim army, wherever they went, they did not force anyone to accept Islam. Instead, they allowed them to practice whatever faith they chose to follow. But as they were under protection of the Muslims, therefore they were required to pay a tax, and this tax was less than Muslims themselves paid in zakat. So generally, the Muslims went to any country, they were given these conditions, that accept Islam or accept Islamic government and pay the tax or fight. So these were the three things which they could do. But if they accepted the Islamic government, and as it's saying, they didn't actually become Muslims, then the tax that they paid, the jizya, is much less than what the zakat that the Muslims pay. So it means then that you are actually financially better not to become a Muslim than become Muslim, because you, obviously being a Muslim, you have to pay much more. If a person paid the tax and the Muslim could not protect them, then the Muslims returned that money. They didn't keep the money. The freedom that they allowed in that country was far better than the people had experienced before. And it was for this reason that the message of Islam, that the people themselves chose to become Muslims. So when they went there, they allowed people to practice their own faith if they wanted to, and do the things that they wanted. They gave them the rights that they should have had. And many countries before that didn't give them that thing. So when they saw how the Muslims were behaving, it was this that attracted them to Islam. And so they became Muslims. Right, now we move on to the Ahmadiyya concept of jihad. So one misunderstanding that many Muslims are claiming is that our founder, Hazrat Mirza Ghulam Ahmad, forbade jihad. And this certainly was not the case, and we should understand this. But as I've been pointing out, he was against the tendency to label any kind of war as jihad. And this is the problem, that Muslims tend to label every war as a jihad. As I said, if it's a holy war, if it's for God, then it's got to be for God. It can't be for land, it can't be for oil, it can't be for power, money, or anything like that. So call it what it really is. This is what Hazrat Mirza Ghulam Ahmad was saying. The jihad to which God invites us in the Holy Quran is described in this verse. So obey not the disbelievers and strive by means of it, i.e. the Quran, a great striving. So this is the main thing, to live by the Holy Quran, to strive to purify yourself. And this is what he's trying to get through to all the Muslims. So therefore, in this day and age, the jihad should be through explaining and practicing the beautiful teachings of Islam. If this is done, then the real steps towards real peace will be taken. And this is what the Jamaat Ahmadiyya tries to promote, that follow the true teachings of Islam. And I say it many times, I honestly believe that if Muslims were behaving properly in this country, this will become a Muslim country. It so badly needs the Islamic teachings. But unfortunately, they see a different type of Islam. So Hazrat Mirza Ghulam Ahmad alayhi salam announced, "You should understand it well, that the need of the time is not the wielding of the sword, it is the pen that has to be used." Now we've seen that Muslims have used terrorism, they've fought wars. Where has it got them? Whereas, as he's saying here, use the pen, use reason and logic, win the people's hearts, will have a greater effect. The modern technology, the weaponry and things like that, Muslims stand no chance in fighting such battles. And that's what we've seen. So, as he's saying, the pen is mightier than the sword. Again, he's continued to say that opponents have expressed about Islam and assaults that different sciences have drawn my attention to the fact that equipped with the weapon of the pen, I should enter the battlefield and show them the miraculous bravery of Islam and its powers. And of course, we know that he wrote over 80 books and explained clearly to Muslims and non-Muslims what is a true teaching to Islam. He had so many debates explaining these sort of things. And this is what we believe, that, you know, the Messiah of Islam is like the Messiah of the Jews. They brought the teaching of love and forgiveness, not fighting. And this is why one of the prophecies was that fighting would be stopped in the time of the promised Messiah. Now, are Muslims therefore allowed to fight? First of all, we can see the example of the second Khalifa, that he formed the Furqan army. And this army fought in the Kashmir war to freedom. He didn't call it jihad, but they were allowed to fight. So, of course, we can fight, but calling it jihad, that's a different thing. Again, we see in the First World War, in the Second World War, many Ahmadis took part in this and fought in these wars. So when there's a need, by all means, we can fight. No one is stopping you from fighting. But we're talking about jihad and normal fighting, political wars and things like that. Of course, Ahmadis do take part. Again, a third example was the India and Pakistan wars. Until, of course, they banned Ahmadis from being in the Pakistani army, many of the Pakistani Ahmadis hold high positions and fought very well in these wars. But as I said, these are wars, but we should not label them as jihad. That's a different thing when it's holy war. A holy war, a jihad, can only be called by the Khalifa. And over the last 100 years, with so many jihads being called, none's been called by the Khalifa, and we don't recognize any of them as a true jihad. So all Ahmadis are taking part in the true jihad, and that, of course, is purifying themselves, doing self-reformation, and trying to strive to win the pleasure of Allah. That jihad is ongoing all the time. Oops, that's it. Okay, so that's my talk, and now we'll open it up for anybody to have any comments, views, questions, or anything like this, please. Come on, yeah, there must be someone who's got something to say.
If there's someone who would like to say something, you can raise your hand. You can also use the chat option to send in your question as well, if that's where you feel comfortable.
This is a topic which I'm sure many of you have faced in various different ways. So maybe you can explain your experience and how you answered it while people were saying these sort of things. What is jihad, or was Islam spread by the sword, or even Ahmadiyya concepts, like we say. I'm sure you've faced these things. So anybody got any comments or any views they want to say?
Rabbi Sahib, I had a question. I think I've asked this before as well, but maybe I've not understood it. What I wanted to understand is that, you know, in certain countries, especially in Asia, with the minorities of the people, there's a lot of, you know, religious fights, such as, you know, they don't allow them to build their mosques, their church, or they destroy their churches and mosques and so on. And you know, with regards to that, and also Ahmadis as well, who have been persecuted in these countries as well, and the war which is still up at the moment. I mean, not war, I mean the prosecution which is going at the moment, still up to now. Why is it that, but this is kind of obviously kind of, you know, clearly they are breaking the mosque, they are, you know, stopping them to worship in that sense. And obviously and I know you have just said that, you know, we should think wisely and fight with the pen, and, you know, purification and all of that side as well. But at the same time, is there not a need for jihad as a physical jihad in these countries at the moment, or is there another approach to it?
I mean, obviously the Jamaat has been persecuted right from the beginning, and like you say, we've had mosques destroyed and so on and so forth. But look at what's happened since. Despite this, the Jamaat has gone from strength to strength. Every mosque they destroy, we build hundreds of mosques all around the world. Every time they impose or try and kill someone, so many thousand people join. So, yes, the persecution is, I wouldn't say as bad as the Holy Prophet Muhammad, but certainly it's very, very bad. But the Jamaat has refused to be drawn into fighting. Instead, they're following this principle given to us by the Prophet ﷺ, that fight with the pen by using reason and logic and win the people's hearts. That's what we've been doing, and we can see the result of that. Whereas, as I said, if you look to Muslims who have turned to terrorism or fighting, what they achieved. I mean, Palestine is a classic example that what's happened. The Jews have had this policy of trying to rebuild and reclaim the land. And the Palestinians have been slowly losing more and more land. And now they are in such a weak position. And we see now, even with Saudi Arabia, they're starting to lose money because oil is not being used as much, and they're raising taxes and all sorts of things. So, I mean, they're not achieving anything by following this policy of terrorism, of fighting and things like that. Whereas the policy that we've been following with the Prophet ﷺ, we have, alhamdulillah, been going from strength to strength. Now, of course, if it got to such a difficult position, the Khalifa may call jihad. There's nothing stopping it because it is Islamic teaching. But this has not been the way, and so far none of the Khalifas have called a jihad. So we should remain steadfast and keep praying and asking Allah for help and carrying on what we're doing now. And inshallah, the Jamaat will keep going from strength to strength. The prophecy is that Islam will prevail over all religions. We believe that will happen through Ahmadiyyat. So we believe that we've got the support of Allah helping us all the time. And until Allah informs the Khalifa that you should fight, then we should carry on showing the peaceful way that we're doing. And I say peaceful, but I think it's a very successful way that we've been doing.
Jazakallah, Professor. I think we've got a few questions on the chat side as well.
Okay. Let me have a look at that. So the war is completely prohibited. Okay, well, as I said, war is war. What we're talking about is jihad, holy war. That's a different thing. And, we see, for instance, a classic example that I often quote is the Falkland War. I don't know if you remember, but basically England looked after Falklands, which is right next to Argentina. Thatcher was in political problems, and she chose to remove the only boat that was protecting the Falklands, and so inviting, in a way, Argentina to attack, and then used that as an excuse to fight, and she regained office. She won through that. And we've seen so many different wars that what is the true reason behind these wars is often not said. But war in itself happens, and that can never be prohibited as such. What we're talking about is the jihad, the holy war, when you're doing it for Allah. Now, obviously, when we go back to the Crusades, there the Pope gave this edict that this crusade is going to be a holy war, and if you die, you go to heaven. And so many people responded, and that's why they attacked the Muslim countries. So this is using religion for their own purposes. What we're saying, as I defined, that if it's a true jihad, it's got to be defensive, and it's got to be for the sake of religion. Now, over the last century, as I said, there's been many, many wars. I believe two wars can come into that category. The first was the Afghan-Soviet Union war. Here, the Soviet Union were the aggressors, and they wanted to win. But the way the Afghans responded, again, that wasn't the Islamic way. The second war was Bosnia. I showed you the picture of when we took aid there. And unfortunately, no jihad was actually called for this because they didn't recognize Bosnia as an Islamic country. But it's got to be, again, with Bosnia, the Serbs were attacking them, and it was for religion. They wanted to wipe out Islam. So that condition has to be there to call it a holy war. But war is war, and fighting for land or whatever reason. I mean, very often we don't know the real reason, but war has continued. After the Prophet came, we had the First World War, we had the Second World War, and we're heading for a Third World War. So war is there. It's not stopping war, it's stopping jihad. Right, the next question, the term jihad or jihadi is used very loosely, that's true, in the media, or with an incorrect interpretation. What is the best way to advertise, clarify the true meaning of jihad amongst the general public? Many of my friends were completely unaware of the concept of the internal struggle in fighting desires and vices. But as you said, we've given the three main reasons of what jihad is. The easiest way of describing jihad is the utmost effort to strive. This is how I normally would define it to anybody. And that can be applied to anything. So like you say, this internal struggle, people can understand this. If you explain what the Jihad Akbar is, and even the Jihad Kabir and then Jihad Saghir, I've given this talk many times, and people have understood very, very clearly then what is jihad. So this is what we got to make them understand, that the word Islam, it means peace, and it's a religion of peace. But when you see the hate and terrorism, this has got nothing to do with the religion of Islam. So they should understand for what it is and make this very clear. So yes, by all means, carry on explaining to people there is the internal struggle, and that's the best way of describing it. Do you think, even after so much discrimination and brutality that against Ahmadis in Pakistan, will Ahmadis be given permission to fight? Personally, I don't think that's going to happen. I think it's going to be something else. We've seen just in recent times how Allah through the coronavirus has basically really destroyed mankind, and it's something which you can't even see, but how quickly it's toppled everything. We're going to be suffering from this for many, many, many years. So I always think that actually more than likely it will be a country will become an Ahmadi country. I thought it'd be one of the African countries, maybe Gambia or Ghana. And when that African country or that country becomes an Ahmadi country and people see the true Islam, that I believe will have effect. The other alternative, of course, is the way mankind's heading is to have another war. And of course, the effects of the war, we've seen what effects had of the First World War, the effects of the Second World War. If there's a nuclear war, it's going to be disastrous. I don't see that the Khalifa will give permission to fight in Pakistan. As I was pointed out, I don't think it's needed. I think that we have achieved so much from this. And it's wonderful how Allah works. That, Zia al-Haq brought this blasphemy law into position in Pakistan. And what was the result of that? The Khalifa, the fourth Khalifa, came out of Pakistan into the West. And once he came into the West, you've seen how the UK and all these other countries outside of Pakistan has greatly developed, spiritually, I mean. So, it's Pakistan's loss, but Ahmadiyya is for the whole world, not just for one country. So Pakistan, yes, maybe they are carrying on with this persecution, but the result of that is that Ahmadis freely go to other countries and spread the message of Ahmadiyyat all around the world. And that's why now we have Jamaats in every other country. I don't think that would have happened even to this day if the Khalifa had remained in Pakistan. But because of this persecution, it's the result. So there's blessings in everything. Yes, it's very bad what's happening in Pakistan, and it's very bad when they do these sorts of things. But this is what we say the true Tabligh is. When people respond against you, it means you're having an effect. People are taking notice of you. If no one's responding against you, you're not having any effect at all. So in Pakistan, they've responded against us and it's having an effect. So alhamdulillah, we've got Allah helping us. So I don't think personally that we will have a war in Pakistan, but Allah knows best. Any other questions? Nope, that's it. Okay, anybody else got anything they would like to say?
Assalamualaikum Rabbi Saab, this is Toby here.
Yeah, I was just thinking about you. I was just going to say, you got anything to say? Yes, Toby, I'm sure you've faced this question many, many times. So what would you like to say?
Yeah, Jazakallah. Rabbi Saab, Jazakallah. Just back up, I was just a little bit, yeah. I think just briefly, as you have beautifully elaborated, jihad, or whether Jamaat should be allowed to fight or not, we as Jamaat members, we have no any clue, because as we know, that jihad is not like, as Murabba just said, we as individuals, we cannot just take up swords from nowhere without any command from the Khalifa. And the Khalifa cannot do anything until he is instructed by Allah. That is the guidance we believe in. So that is what I wanted to add on that particular point. But the other thing is that I know some of Muslims I talk to, you hear, oh, do you think Baghdad is a street or in London? Do you think Afghanistan is one of the streets in Liverpool? No, it's not. But the fact of the matter is, the Holy Prophet Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam, he actually, Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam, he went through a hardship after hardship until he got the command from Allah, which is the verse has been recited, أُذْنَ لِلَّذِينَ يُقَاتِلُونَ فِي سَبِيلِ اللَّهِ بِأَنَّهُمْ ظُلْمٌ. And now those who have been wronged, they have been allowed to fight. So it's not about you see somebody and fight because they're in our own countries, but the lack of leadership, that is where we end up seeing every single day there's a new extremist group coming up because they think that they want to create a power. They want to create something so that they're defending. But as of any leader, they get defeat after defeat. 100 and hundreds of young people have died innocently. I wanted to share my brother Da'in. Salam.
Jazakallah, you seem to have broken up a little bit in your voice. I don't know why that was, but anyway, yes, I mean, it's very tragic. I mean, whenever you see any war, for whatever reason, there can really be no winners to that. So no one really should desire war. As you said, I mean, it's up to the Khalifa, and the Khalifa is guided by Allah. And this is one of the blessings that we have, and we should always appreciate that we have got that leadership. And we know that that leadership is striving, doing jihad for the sake of Allah. Many of these other Muslim leaders, they're not doing it for Allah's sake. They're doing it for their own reasons and power or whatever it is. So we are lucky. We should be very fortunate that we have Allah to guide us. And as I said, it's a worldwide Jamaat. We should always focus on that, not just one particular country. And what is happening, if you look over the last 100 years, what has happened with one person who's began this community to now, I mean, it clearly shows that we have Allah's assistance. So, of course, I think every Ahmadi is ready. If the Khalifa says, do a jihad, we will do it. But, I mean, the Prophet ﷺ has made it clear that the jihad that we should be doing at this time, the true jihad that we should be doing, is the self-reformation, the spreading the message by the pen. And that is something which each and every one of us should be doing. And of course, we can do it if we want to do it. So we should be taking part in this jihad And this jihad will have its effects. But if we don't, then of course, the results could be that Pakistan could happen in this country. It can happen anywhere. If we don't explain what true Islam is, then there are many people who is against Islam, who see Islam as a threat, who think that Islam is all about hatred and terrorism. So if we don't demonstrate what the true Islam is, this is the Islam they're going to believe. So if you don't want what's happened in Pakistan to happen here, then it's for every one of us to strive to do the true Islam and spread the true message of Islam. And if we do that, then Allah's blessings will fall on each and every one of us. Okay, has anybody else got anything else to say, or shall we finish it there?
Rabbi Sab, I had a question, if it's okay. I wanted to basically ask, normally with our friends, non-Muslim friends, and also when we have, such events as when we invite people to our mosques for Tabligh events and open mosque events and so on, some of the questions that we do get asked from the non-Muslim friends is that, what's our take on jihad? And when we try to explain to them the points that you have mentioned today as well, such as the basically the fight with the pen, and spirituality, and purifying yourself, and all of these, when we explain it to them in this sort of a way, it's my kind of thinking that they just kind of thinking, okay, but I also feel that they think that it's because they're not that spiritually in religion that much, and they don't not have that strong belief in God, obviously, as well. A lot of these a lot of the Muslim friends, they would want another sort of response, such as something else, which I'm not aware of as well. Is there any other way that we can also advise them, or do tabligh in that sort of way, to kind of, what other arguments can we give to them apart from these?
I mean, obviously, again, we mentioned about the philosophy and teachings of Islam, and how you raise yourself up from that low self to a high spiritual self. And that's the real way to get through to people. They need to understand what religion is. What's the purpose of religion? Religion is not about fighting. This is not why religion came about. It's about our development, our spiritual development, to become that high spiritual being, to raise ourselves from that animal self to that high spiritual being. And as I said, when I first book I read was Philosophy and Teachings, when I first came to that passage and read about being an animal, just following your instincts, I felt that I was like that. I was an animal. And that hurt. And that made me want to read on this book and find out more about Islam. So this is what we got to do. We got to explain people through our example and through our words and through our prayers, but help them to understand what truly a religion is, what its true purpose is. So this is not about fighting. Fighting is really against religion. That's why I say it's the lowest out of the three forms of jihad, because no war can be holy. How can a war be holy where you're fighting for Allah? So Allah's allowed it, but only because it's not fulfilling your purpose in life. And as I said before, this is something which we need to get through to people. And I often ask these people, that, what is your purpose in life? And it's the fundamental question that everyone should ask, but most people never ask this question. So why are we created? If there is a creator, there must be a reason why. So it's not just to do good works and things like this. There must be more than that. So Islam or religion gives you the answers. And this is what we need to try to get through to people. Help them to understand what is actually the purpose of religion. That it's not about terrorism. It's not about fighting and killing and things like that. Instead, it's about developing yourself and becoming that high spiritual being and developing that relationship with God so that we can continue to the next life. So this is the main way that I would try and convey to these people to help them to understand why they need a religion. Okay, anything else, or shall we leave it there? Right, so again, if anybody's got any subject that they want to discuss, please, as I said before, speak to Zaid or Toby, and we will, inshallah, use that as a topic. And I think let's finish it for today then. And if we can just join me in silent prayers, please. Okay, Bismillah. I'm sorry, Amin.
Ameen.
Okay, assalamu alaikum.
Wa alaikum assalam.